It's time for the biggest non-league football debate in the country. Search official BOTN and get involved with tonight's show.
Well, hello there and welcome to this week's edition of the non-league debate, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a plethora of non-league talent on my sofa for today. We've got Frank Wilson, David Richardson and Alex Neri joins us on the sofa for today's debate. And we start off really with what was meant to be one of the biggest games of the Vanarama South season, leading up towards the very end of the season between Woking and Torquay United. And going into the weekend, it's all changed really. Torquay had been on an absolutely blistering run of form going into this weekend, and it looks like they potentially could wrap up the title on Saturday at Kingfield.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks ago I think it was, we were highlighting it as a potential, well, the biggest game in the National League South, certainly all season, and potentially the biggest game in the National League, both tiers. So, but Woking have just had a terrible slip right at the worst moment, and Torquay have just put their foot down and said goodbye to them in the rearview mirror, so to speak. So yeah, I can't see anything other than a Torquay National South title. I think Woking have got the game to upset them on Saturday and put the celebrations on hold for a little bit, but yeah, I think it's Torquay's now.
Well, it's an incredible run of form that Torquay have had going into Saturday's fixture. Of course, it was really helped by their win last night against Chelmsford City. 3-1 win just adds more emphasis onto Torquay's potential winning of the title on Saturday. Going towards where Woking have gone into this game on Saturday and the run of form they've had, particularly since the FA Cup run, can we really pinpoint where it's gone wrong for Woking since that particular game against Watford?
Well, I think before the Watford game, Alan Dowson was saying how, you know, if you want to be playing in this biggest game the club's had for probably 2 decades, then, you know, go out and win all the ones leading up to that. And probably around that time, you did actually look at Woking and think they could really win the title. I think it went to Billericay and won 4-0. They beat Hampton twice over Christmas, and that was probably their best patch of the season when they were really playing well. Obviously, after the Watford game, they lost Jamal Loza, who went to Billericay, and Toby Edzo, who was on loan from Nottingham Forest. And I think it's so difficult to replace players when you've been putting the same team out every week, and it's difficult to do even for a manager like Alan Dowson, who knows that level inside out and has so many contacts in the game. You know, they have tried to bring players in, but it probably hasn't quite clicked as they'd liked.
They don't lose many games, though, do they?
No, that's
right. They draw quite a lot of games.
I think,
yeah, they've thrown away a few advantages, haven't they?
It's probably more at the other end of the pitch, really, in terms of scoring goals. They probably struggle. That said, I think they're the second highest scorers in the league. So you wouldn't look at it like that, but maybe in this last sort of couple of months, that has been the case. You look at Torquay and they've got Jamie Reid up front, who's I think got about 20 odd goals now, 27 I think last night against Chelmsford. So Woking don't really have one of those sort of strikers that they can really pin their hopes on for goals. I think what you do have to remember though with Woking is that where they were at the start of the season when Alan Dowson went in, just relegated from the National League like Torquay were, but with a completely blank canvas in terms of players. And people point towards Hampton and 4 or 5 players that Alan Dowson took from there, but it still leaves you with sort of 13, 14 others that you've got to bring in. So it's not, and also that Hampton side were excellent last year, but they didn't, finish top like Dartford did, or it wasn't like they were taking 4 or 5 players from those teams that were challenging for the title. So I think Alan Dowson's done a top job, but Torquay being full time, Gary Johnson, such an experienced manager. He's got them over.
Still seem to be talking it down though, almost like they haven't got a chance of getting something on Saturday. Because I think it's only 7 points between the two sides. If they win, and I think it's at Woking, isn't it?
It is at Kingfield on Saturday.
They've got every chance of winning the game, and does that make it more interesting for the final sort of 5 or 6 games? Or
well, I mean it does, but I think that Torquay have got enough about them to go again. I think they're going to take 1,400 fans there as well.
Well, their ultimate test will be Saturday, won't it? Because if they can go there and win, then the debates that we've been having on the show about how closely sort of pipped they are.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge test for both sides, but Torquay have got the comfort blanket of going now with a 7-point gap, and knowing that they don't have to take all 3 points. So just on Johnson though, going into Torquay, when he went in there in September, I think it was, or beginning of October, they were 14th. 14th in the league. I know Woking have been at the top end all season, so he's just taken them, to another level. There's no doubt about it. They would have been paying pretty big bucks for Johnson's services. To get a manager of his standard down in Step 2 National League South. But you pay the big bucks, you get the results.
Absolutely.
I think
good to see it in management season. Actually. To be honest, good to see sort of that sort of money being spent on the man in charge as opposed to the striker. I
also think it reflects well on Gary Johnson as well, because it wasn't that long ago he was in the Championship playoff final with Bristol City and literally on the verge of being a Premier League manager. And
their family seem to just breed sort of good managers.
Absolutely, Lee's doing a fantastic job at the moment at Bristol City. So again, that continues. Looking on to the remaining games left between the two clubs, we've been with Woking's last 4 games after the Torquay game. Chelmsford City away, Concord Rangers at home, Dulwich Hamlet away, and Gloucester City being the final game of them for the season. And then looking on to Torquay, they've got Eastbourne Borough, Chippenham Town, Hunger for Talents and Albans. You could kind of argue and say that after the Woking game, Torquay have got the much easier run into the final part of the season. And Woking really have got it all to do, including the difficult trip to Chelmsford City. Despite the defeat last night, good side, got decent players in their ranks. And Concord Rangers, another decent team. And again, Dulwich Hamlet with Champion Hill, it's not an easy place to go to.
Yeah, well I mean, with Chelmsford, they're looking at a playoff spot, and it's really important with these playoffs with the top 7 spaces that you finish the season strongly. You don't just get in the playoffs now and say that's it, because that the difference between finishing 7th, 6th and 5th and 4th, it gives you such an advantage in that playoff, that new system where you don't have to play 2 away ties. You get home advantage the better you finish. So I think that listen to that run in that Torquay have got. Put the Woking game aside this weekend, I would expect them to win all 4 of those games.
I'm just thinking, from management, do they adopt a different sort of mental approach and general approach after the game at Torquay? Because if they go into the game being realistic and thinking that it's a game that they might not win, which it obviously is, do they then have to sort of reassess what their sort of final run and what their form is going to look like? Because I think up until this point what we've seen is just a 2-horse race really. But it'll be interesting to see, will the club sort of reassess things after Saturday? Because if they don't win that game, like you've just said, they've got to have strong momentum, but they've almost sort of been not exhausting themselves but trying so hard to keep up with Torquay, which has been such a magnanimous effort. But will they sort of not slow things down but just sort of recalibrate and think, right, okay, these are the remaining 4 games that we've got. Do we rest certain players at certain stages and try and keep everybody sort of fresh and healthy? Be a really interesting sort of approach and mindset.
Well, I think he's got to do that. I think that they'll finish second. They can't finish third, so they've got themselves a home tie, semi-final. I think he'll get this game out of the way, whatever happens. If they win it and they win it well, and it's 4 points, then his
of course, it's still a bit of
If it gets down to 2 games and the title's gone, then all the focus has to go to that semi-final.
And I think having that 4 games, if Torquay do win on Saturday, then the league is effectively theirs. I think having that 4 games, the pressure almost alleviates a little bit of the season. And like Frank said, you do refocus. I always look back with Dartford last year, losing the title literally in the last sort of minute of the season, and then they went into the playoffs and lost in the semi-final stage straight away. To Braintree, you didn't see that coming. So I think having that 4-game gap just to reevaluate things and accept that you're in the playoffs, it isn't such a bad thing, rather than maybe it being on the last day of the season when there's not too much time.
Taking it away from what we've been saying about Torquay and bringing it back to Woking, and I know this is a question that I got asked on a couple of shows ago, and we've mentioned it briefly tonight. I think you've already stated your case on what my question is going to be, David, but with Douse and Woking and what he's achieved this season, regardless of whatever happens, if they do win the league or they get into the playoffs and get promoted or they don't get promoted, regardless of those two things, can you count Douse's achievements as a success at Woking? I'll open this up to all three of you. Do you feel it's been a successful season at Woking for Douse, regardless of what happens?
Yeah, without doubt, I think. Like I said, where they were in May when he came in, also at a time where, and he's mentioned this before, you didn't have the same amount of time to be signing players, because obviously getting to the playoff finals later, and you start your sort of recruitment process later than everyone else. I think the FA Cup was obviously a bonus. No one really expected that. But the expectations with Woking in the league would be to be up in the playoffs, and I thought if they can get in the playoffs, if it's 7th or 6th, then I think they've done well, to be honest. Especially when before the start of the season all the managers were saying, oh, it looks like the toughest the league's ever been, and you look at the top 7 now and you think, well, any one of those could probably win the playoffs if they get in there. So yeah, without doubt, he's been a massive success, really. I think in the top 2 tiers, probably up there with the likes of Justin Edinburgh and Tim Flowers and Gateshead, Ben Clark and Steve Watson there. So yeah, I think top job.
Ultimately, they've played good football. They've entertained decent crowds. Yeah. And after the season they had last year, where they were in the top 2 in the National League in October, and then they just slipped. The rug got pulled on from underneath them, and they couldn't buy a result, and they went down with nothing but a whimper, really. So to see the football that they've seen this season has been great, and you can't rule out the double relegation as well, because those teams that come down from the National League, it's so tough to make yourself competitive and to be competitive, to get back up to where you've come from. So I think he's had a great season. I think he's brought in a good calibre of player, and ultimately he's they've got results. I think they will fall short, but I think they're more than good enough to go up in the playoffs.
And leaving it for the very last thing we're going to talk about with the game on Saturday, predictions for Saturday. Honest predictions. What do you reckon the score will be between the two sides?
Well, I think it'll be a draw. I think Torquay have got that blanket, that comfort blanket, to go there and sit tight and maybe hit on the break. I think they're good enough side to do that. So I'll say a draw. I'll say a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I thought a draw as well. Maybe a high-scoring one. I think both teams can score goals, but also maybe leak a few as well. So I was going to go 2-2 with that one. Yeah, Torquay, point suits them, and then they'll almost be there to get over the line.
Frank?
Hoping to be proved wrong, I'm going to say 0-0. Dead boring game. All the expectation built up with it, and obviously, hopefully, it's the complete opposite. But it'll be tight. It will be a tight game.
I come on to this show and I want goals, and everybody's gone with the draw. Standard stuff. But no, we all look forward to the game on Saturday, and it'll be interesting to see if Torquay can get across the line or Woking can just stem it off for just a little bit more come the end of the game on Saturday. Right, we're going to move into the news now, going to the non-league paper, which is bread and butter for you two guys. And the main story on the front page is salvation, or what was salvation really, for Gateshead. Of course, dire straits for that club at the moment, looking for a buyout. It looked like it was on the cards, but as of today, it seems like the rug has well and truly been pulled underneath the carpet, it seems.
Yeah, David actually sent me an email today with the news that that Chris Dunphy, who was set to take over, had pulled out. I'll be brutally honest, I wasn't surprised to read that, because in any takeover of any football club, it's not done until it's done, until the signatures are all there. But in non-league football, the takeover of a club is so tempestuous. There are so many hurdles to get over. It's not like you can just come in there and when there are takeovers in the Premier League, they're rare, but they just happen. Yeah. Because people have the resources and the funds to do that. But at this level of football, there are so many hurdles to get over, and in this case, the current owners, Ranjan Vagazi and the financial director, Joseph Carla, are making things very, very difficult for any kind of takeover. So I think Chris Dunphy has just said, look, enough's enough. I'm not working with you guys. it's a decaying club. If I'm honest with you, there's an opportunity there for a takeover and to make them grow, but it's very, 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 very ugly, and unfortunately that they've withdrawn, and it's sticky times ahead for Gateshead. It really is.
It sounds very much like a following trend at the moment in non-league football with clubs, like you were saying, certain clubs seem decaying. We look at different examples like the worst case scenario, North Ferriby United recently, who were FA Trophy finalists and winners, I believe, who then went into financial trouble, been liquidated. Nuneaton Borough exactly the same. Is it becoming more and more of a trend in not just non-league but in football in general that too many clubs are now getting to a stage where they're relying on a takeover, whoever that might be, to save them from oblivion, really? Is that becoming more and more of a trait within the non-league game just as much?
Well, obviously, we've named quite a few examples just in that little paragraph there. It always seems like a sense of abandonment, doesn't it? I mean, we're not always, it's obvious, we're not always privy to all of the facts. But it does seem to happen a lot where, teams are being led in one direction and all of a sudden things overnight just seem drastic and they capitulate very, very quickly. I think what it does do is it highlights what the successes look like in some of the other examples and for most of the other teams out there that are being run consistently by the same owners, with the same managers and staff and backroom staff and everything like that. I think for me, it just highlights that it's not an easy job, and it gets taken for granted as a manager when you're involved in non-league football and involved in the run-ins of clubs. You've really got to sort of respect and understand sort of what the work and effort is that goes into sort of keeping teams afloat, because it's not easy. I mean, obviously, gates are not always high. You certainly go through your sticky patches as a football club. Things aren't always sort of rosy. It's just a shame that some of these clubs, as we're mentioning here, have got such a rich history, and they've gone on to be successful or been successful in the past. Yeah. Their names are on the walls in certain aspects in terms of achievements, and none of us want to see it happen. Chris
Dunphy would have looked at the Gateshead proposal a few months ago, and he'd have seen it as an attractive proposition because of where the club is in the northeast, in Newcastle. Yeah. They've got that. The catchment area of so many fans. What they're looking to do is to pull in Newcastle fans. That's what they need to do. Yeah. They need gates of 2,000 plus to make the club sustainable. And he would have looked at that and said, it's possible to do that. Despite the fact of where they play. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. They play at an athletic stadium. Yeah, so there's not that closeness for the fans to get to the players. You don't quite have that match day experience. But these would have all been opportunities that he would have seen and thought to himself, listen, we can grow this football club. But I think he's just looked at it and said, I'm not dealing with these people. And I'm not being told what to do. And I'm not following their lead. I've put down my proposal to buy the club, to take over. Yeah. They agreed in principle. And somewhere since Friday afternoon, they're not towing the line. So listen, I think at the end of the day, these are professional businessmen who don't want to do business with a certain type of businessman, and he's just basically said enough's enough. Fingers crossed he comes back, and Gates said breathe again. But it's a really, really it's a rocky road ahead for them. It really is.
And I think it says a lot as well when obviously the players and staff haven't been paid there, and they've been kicked out of the offices at the ground and things like that. And recently, the players and staff put out a statement saying to the owners, we want you to go. You have to leave, and I think that says a lot when it comes to that. Obviously, Ebbsfleet's been a similar situation, but I know you haven't been involved in something like that. But as a manager or a player, how do you keep them motivated like that? I wouldn't know, because they're still doing really, because this has sort of been going on. For I mean, despite how many years of experience that you might have, name every sort of top flight manager that we all sort of look at and admire, and none of them I would expect that have sort of worked in situations like what we're discussing tonight, where things are sort of so toxic behind the scenes and communication has sort of ceased and broke down to such a degree that that they're even putting out statements to say that this is what the situation looks like, and it's almost like a Mexican standoff. Either you go or I go, or the club goes. It's really, really sort of difficult to read and to sort of listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, talking about pressure and with particular clubs, with one club being under a lot of pressure, news today of another one which is slightly alleviated, and that is with Ebbsfleet United, and their players have finally been paid.
Yeah, I sort of read it on the way to the studio tonight. Just on their social media, it just sort of announced that there sort of seems to be some reconciliation there, and obviously there is allegedly players and staff are now been paid in full for the season or for whatever period that they were unpaid for, and again, you know, fair play to the club obviously for doing that, because, you know, we've talked already tonight about situations that seem very unclear and that seem like they might not have the same sort of resolution. I know that we've had Nathan Ashmore on the show a few weeks ago, and obviously spoke quite honestly about the situation. Very professional, you know, didn't obviously disclose the details, but sort of gave us a little bit more of an insight into sort of what's going on there. But no, just pleased to see them sort of get things back on track.
Yeah, I mean, Ebbsfleet and Gateshead and many of our other clubs are just examples of clubs at this level that there aren't many that are, you know, just completely where everything's harmonious. There are so many clubs in the National League and below, and even at League Two. Yeah. Where the finances, it's such a thin line between being sustainable and you know, facing problems, facing financial difficulty. So I'm never surprised when these stories emerge, when players aren't paid on time or there's outstanding bills, because, you know, balancing the books in a semi-professional football club or full-time football club like Ebbsfleet is a very difficult thing to do, you know. So, you know, great news that Ebbsfleet players have been paid, but I think I don't think it's the fact that they've not been paid recently. I think it's more to do with the fact that 8 or 9 of the last months they've not been paid on time. Yeah. So that straight away there's a long-term problem there, and we deal with these problems week in, week out at the paper. We see them all the time. You know, rumours surfacing that players haven't been paid. So. You know, it's good news that Ebbsfleet have sorted it out, but for how long, you know, I'm not so sure.
I mean, the good thing is that, or one positive sort of outlook is that it doesn't seem to have, from an outside perspective, it doesn't seem to have distracted the players or the staff as much as what it has in some of these other examples.
Yeah, I mean
it's a really serious situation down at Ebbsfleet and has been for some time, but...
Well, I think Gateshead were my favourites and many people's favourites to go down at the start of the season, and there they are punching away for a playoff spot. So, you know, full credit to the players.
No, absolutely, and fingers crossed there's a resolution for Gateshead very, very soon. Moving away from the Vanarama National and moving to the Bostik North, news which broke today regarding Averley FC, and that is that they've parted company with James Webster, which is rather shocked considering where they are in the league table, pushing for a playoff place at the moment. It's quite a crucial and rather surprising time to lose a manager, really, coming so close towards the end of the season.
Yeah, obviously news broke earlier this evening, and obviously nothing sort of concrete has been announced in terms of what's obviously gone on there, and if it will, I don't know, but surprise in terms of his departure. Obviously James has gone there from Brighton Sea Region, and it seemed to me like with their new stadium and everything like that it was going to be a package deal that would probably see him there for the next sort of 5 years. That was sort of my opinion. I thought he'd sort of really build and grow the club and sort of put his stamp on things. So sort of seeing that tonight on social media and hearing about that is a big shock. And obviously Averley are sort of 5th or 6th in the division at the minute, certainly cemented themselves in the playoffs. I don't think they can be caught, actually. I'm not sure sort of what the maths are behind it, but I think they're sort of well comfortably placed now. Whether they've got a contingency plan in place, I don't know.
Yeah, the timing's obviously strange. 5 games before the end of the season. Got a playoff place as well. I mean, in their statement they said due to commitments, James Webster couldn't fully commit to the job there, which, I think it sounds strange. Obviously, we don't quite know the full story. It'd be interesting to see what they do, whether they promote from within. Obviously, they just need to keep on doing what they have been doing for a lot of the season, and hope it serves them well in the playoffs. But obviously, I was surprised to see that.
It's just who's going to take over. I mean, obviously, we don't know who's working at the club, who's employed in the lower ranks of the club. You know, reserves or 23s, whatever that is. But seems very, very strange. I mean, they've got such a brilliant setup down at Averley, and minimum step 3 really in terms of the ground and the infrastructure there. So the negative thing is it can't be doing the players any good at all.
No, absolutely not. I mean, looking at the table at the moment, just in front of me, Averley 5th in the league with 65 points, level with Coggeshall Town, Haybridge with 67, Malden and Tiptree with 68, and then Bowes and Pitsea have just run away with the league with 83 points. Again, on a mental level, you were just saying about the players, on a mental level, it must be extremely tough losing your manager at a very, very critical part of the season. Where do you go from there, considering you're going to bring in somebody potentially brand new? It might not be somebody from the actual setup they've got. On a mental level, this must be a massive hammer blow for those players at the club, surely.
I can't imagine they'll do an external appointment at this time of year. They would surely just have somebody that they've got their eye on within the club, who's close to the players, who knows how they're feeling. And I imagine they want continuity like that. They might look for a new appointment for next season if they don't go out via the playoffs. But surely they would want.
Well, the thing with James, obviously every manager's different. Their management style. I know that James is very close with the squad. And that's not sort of knowing any secrets. That's just playing against his teams and understanding what his mannerisms are and sort of his style and his approaches. So. It would be a big blow to some of the squad, if not all of the squad, for him to have left. I agree with Alex. I think that you've got to try and sort of keep the ship as steady on course as possible, and hand over to someone that's been involved in the club. We might see another chairman. We might see another example of a chairman sort of step into a management position.
They like doing that.
Yeah, certainly do. But yeah, I mean, watch this space just to sort of find out what happens before Saturday's game.
Probably a case of goes to show how much of an effect a manager actually has probably in this sort of situation. You just sort of think, well, if they've been doing all right to get into the playoffs, why can't they just keep on winning?
The thing is about those four Bostik divisions, the title races have been pretty much done and dusted for weeks and weeks. Dorking have just stormed ahead. Bowes and Pitsea, Hayes and Yedding will win the league this year, and I think it's Cray in the South East. So, everybody else has been playing for second place, third place, fourth place.
For a long time,
if they were going if there was a bit more of a title push, then you'd probably say, wow, that really is a bizarre decision to let the manager go at this time. But I think it's just they're so solidified in those
something important must have happened there. Again, I don't want to start sort of guessing and creating rumours, but something significant must have happened with James Webster for him to have stepped away, leading the club to 5th place, with only a few games to go. It could only be something extremely significant, because otherwise, as a manager, you would, even if you was unhappy with your surroundings, you'd have to sort of honour your team and the players and the fans and stick with it. But I'm sure we'll learn all about it in the next day or so.
Yeah, absolutely. We will look out with that story with impending interest to see what does develop at Averley, especially considering their position in the league at the moment. Right, so towards the final part of this show for this week, we're going to look at the non-league paper team of the day, and plenty of names on the list to feast your eyes on. Which names take your fancy and why for this week?
Well, I like the look of Will Evans playing centre-half, Chesterfield. Chesterfield are actually finishing the season really strongly and laying a marker down for next term. I think since John Sheridan went in there, I think they've only lost 2 games. So he's really got them working, and they look a solid outfit now, and key to that is Evans, great summer recruit from Aldershot, and it's very good. And the other one is Jamie Osborne, Solihull Moors, who's been key to Moors' rise this season and push for promotion. He's been actually a regular fixture in our team of the day. So those 2 really stand out for me.
How about you, David?
Gozi Ogre's in there for Ebbsfleet, who's had a bit of a tough time really after sort of burst on the scene with Woking a couple of seasons ago. Got his move into the Football League with Chesterfield, who obviously then relegated. So I think he was injured for a lot of that season, and then under Martin Allen, he actually had really high hopes for him. He was saying he's going to lead the line for us, and then it didn't work out in the first couple of months, and he went to Boreham Wood, where sort of similar sort of story, but he's linked up again with Gary Hill at Ebbsfleet, who he had as manager at Woking, and and sometimes I think players just react to managers that they've worked with before, and he's really led the line there with Michael Cheek, and when you're keeping someone like Danny Kedwell out of the side, you're obviously
that's a great achievement.
Doing something well. So yeah, he's been scoring a few goals. Also Louis Maynard there for Salford. They've been on a great run of form recently. Gary Alexander sort of changed the style that they were playing. They went through a bit of a bad patch where I think they could have lost 5 in a row. Went to Ebbsfleet, sort of changed to 3 at the back, put all the big men in. I think looking at their squad, it was sort of a team of giants, really.
Yeah, definitely.
They've just been grinding out the results, and that was a massive one for them on the weekend.
I was watching Salford last week against Harrogate on live on the box, and you just touched on it there. I couldn't believe how big they are.
Yeah,
they're just a huge side, and as David says, he's changed the way they play, gone 3 at the back, and they now look like they're just in it to kind of defend games and pick teams off, which is exactly what they need to do, and probably what they needed to do through February and January, February, and lost
their way. Heading into the playoffs as well, they're not far behind Orient, are they really?
Well, I think they're the only ones that can really.
And again, size matters, in terms of playoffs and decisions and set pieces. All these things are hugely important. Don't be surprised if they are a playoff finishing team. That obvious statement, be favourites, but you won't want to be coming up against teams with, like say, players as big as what they've got there. They're a mean team.
You've got to give credit to Graham Alexander actually for changing it the way he has, because
brave, very brave.
There's a lot of expectation at Salford, and I think at the start of the season they were trying to play 4 at the back, trying to pass it out and sort of blow teams away that way, and then maybe when sort of teams maybe work them out, I don't know, it just suddenly wasn't working, and he's changed it, and he's got the right formula at the moment. And I think sometimes managers don't like to swallow sort of their pride or about their philosophies and things like that, but he sort of has done, and and it's actually paid off for the better of the club. So
absolutely,
give him credit.
And actually, talking on the subject, we've got Will Mannion, who's made the team of the day from Aldershot. Just picking on their situation at the moment, it's a dire set of circumstances at the Rec. And I mean, for most Woking fans, it will be a gleeful day that the fact that they're potentially going to get relegated into the National South. But looking from a neutral perspective, it's been a disastrous season for the Shots, hasn't it?
Well, they're another club who, off the pitch, been facing financial problems. I think they're a threadbare squad. I think they've had 14 players, senior players to choose from for the second half of the season. It's just gone terribly wrong. This is a team who, for the last 2 seasons, have been punching away in the playoffs. They had 2 penalty kicks in the eliminator, didn't they, last season to go into the semi-final against Tranmere. And they blew that, and
that was the moment it started. That was going wrong.
That was the moment, and they just haven't recovered. And I think it's be a really tough road for them to get back. I mentioned earlier about the double relegation. I don't think they'll fall into that bracket, but once you go down into that step 2 dungeon, really tough to get out. It really is.
It's massively tough. So again, it's another situation which we will look at with great interest. As much as being a Woking fan and seeing Aldershot in that position, it's never ever nice to see any club in such financial dire straits as they are. And I think the loss of key players in their squad, in particular Jim Kellerman, losing him was a big blow. So fingers crossed that they recover fairly quickly. And on one final note with the show this evening, we turn our attentions to you, Frank. Congratulations with your recent appointment at Kingstonian.
Thank you.
How's it feel to be back?
Not great.
Where do we start? We'll lay out the carpet at least.
No, listen, brilliant. Personally, brilliant. I mean, just getting out of the house and getting away from my wife and my son, and work, and just sort of being back in a football environment, back in a dugout on a Saturday and on the training ground midweek. No, it's been brilliant, to be honest. Last couple of weeks have have been intense, obviously, just given the situation. With a few minutes to spare, obviously, we won't have enough time to sort of, maybe we can dedicate a whole couple of shows to obviously the club and sort of what's sort of gone on there this season. But in the short space of time that I've been there, and obviously working under Kim Harris, has been refreshing, to be honest, and sort of coming into things with Kim with sort of fresh eyes and fresh approaches. Just looking forward to training tomorrow night and looking forward to our first home game in charge on Saturday at home to Enfield. So that's been good.
And that's all we got time for this week's instalment of the non-league debate. Thank you for joining us for this instalment this week, and my thanks to Alex Neri, David Richardson and Frank Wilson for joining me on the Purple Sofa. Get in touch with us on all our social media handles via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and Instagram. Search for the hashtag and handle officialBOTN. Thanks for joining us again. See you soon. Take care for now.